Hall monitor. He's a hall monitor. You got halls in there. Check the halls.
Please be seated. Mr. Williams, is the state ready?
We are, Judge.
Okay, Mr. Adams, how about defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Deputy, thank you very much. You're everybody back. Please take your seats. We do have the jury back with us. Counsel for the state is present. Counsel for defense as well as the defendant, Edgar Collazo. Almost 3:15. Mr. Williams, you may call your next witness.
Now the state calls Marco Palacio.
Yes, sir.
He's the one who compared the prints and compared your fingerprints.
You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this case is the true, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Right. Good afternoon. Go ahead and take your seat, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir. Mr. Williams, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, could you please tell us your full name and spell your last name for the record?
Marco Palacio, Marco Palacio.
Mr. Palacio, where are you currently employed?
Orange County Sheriff's Office.
And what is it that you do, or what is your title at the Orange County Sheriff's Office?
Latent print examiner, fingerprint expert.
How long have you been a latent print examiner?
It will be 17 years and 2.5 months.
Did you say 7?
17.
17. Okay,
Yes.
as in 1-7.
1-7.
Okay, I thought you said 70, and you did not look that old, so I wanted to make sure. Okay,
17.
17 and 2.5 months.
That's correct.
Okay. What type of training have you had to be a latent print examiner? I'm sorry, what is a latent print examiner? What do you do?
Well, part of my official duties are the examination of fragmentary latent prints. But I also examine disease prints, negatives, photographs. Then I compare those prints to non-prints. I report my findings. If I have to testify in court, I will do it.
Okay, before we talk about some of the phrases you just used, can you tell us about your education and background that led you to be able to be a latent print examiner?
In 1998, my first training was 640 hours and deep training with fingerprints with the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Then I started training with latent prints, advanced latent prints training with the FBI, 80 hours with the FDLE, 40 hours with the International Association of Identification, 18 months, 1 year and a half, analyzing latent prints 8 hours a day to become a fingerprint expert.
Now, I want to ask you about some terms that you used. What is a latent fingerprint?
Latent fingerprints is the one that anybody can leave in a surface from the crime scenes. What happened? We had ridges. The skin has chemicals and perspiration, and every time we touch a surface, we're going to leave fingerprints. Depends on the surface that we touch, we can leave fingerprints. There are some surfaces that we cannot leave fingerprints, like concrete blocks, carpet, cloth. But also we have a nice surfaces like glass, wood, plastic, metal, that we can retrieve or recover fingerprints. When we see the fingerprints, we use chemicals, and also we use imprint that we can spray on the surface. We use a special tape, it's a clear tape, cover the area dusted, and transfer to a white cardboard or white paper, and we obtain fingerprints, latent prints. And we call latent prints because they are fragmentary prints. They are not a complete prints.
Well, if that's what a latent print is, what is an inked fingerprint?
Imprint, we call imprint, also we call standard prints, temp prints, non-prints. And the reason we call non-prints is because we have the complete information of the person that is providing the fingerprints. The name, date of birth, gender. Temp print is because we collect the complete fingerprints, starting with the right thumb to the little finger that we call 1, 2, 3, and 10. Also, is standard prints because that's the name that we give to temp prints or non-prints, the standard prints of someone.
Okay. Now, why are fingerprints forensically useful?
Fingerprints are unique and permanent. Nobody has the same fingerprints. We born with them, we die with them.
Now, a few moments ago, you were talking about surfaces, and you indicated that some surfaces are better for a person to leave a print behind that can then be identified. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you gave us a list of prints, a list of surfaces, some which are poor for picking up prints and some which are good, correct?
That's correct.
What about the nature of a poor surface? What about its nature is it that prevents it or makes it difficult to obtain prints from it?
Well, it's a different way. First of all, if the subject is wearing gloves, it's not going to be prints left at the surface. Also, we can touch a surface. If I smell my prints, my fingers, I'm not going to see anything because everything is going to be a smell. It's going to be with the composition there is going to be nothing totally dark or light. Then distortion is one of the factors that we cannot read fingerprints. We cannot see what we're looking for, the characteristics, the details. Also, there are surfaces, like I explained before, the carpet, concrete blocks, wet surfaces. We cannot leave fingerprints on wet surfaces. It's going to be disturbed, and it's not going to be possible to retrieve fingerprints.
Now, when you were talking about the retrieval of fingerprints, You talked about the detail you look for. What exactly are you looking for when you look at a latent fingerprint?
Each fingerprint has a different characteristics. Sometimes we see it, the same characteristics on the same fingerprints. One of the characteristics that we use are dot. It's a little dot. Short ridge, ending ridge, a ridge that starts from one side and end in certain point. Also, bifurcation is one ridge they start on bifurcation, do the bifurcation in one point, and a small island. Those characteristics are the ones that we use to compare fingerprints. I use the latent print, and also I use the non-print, and compare those characteristics. When I had 9, 10 or more characteristics, I call an identification. If I don't see those characteristics, I'm not going to be able to identify those prints. It's not possible to match those prints if we don't see the details of the characteristics.
So let's talk briefly about comparisons. You don't go out into the field and take latent fingerprints, is that correct?
No.
All right, and crime scene investigators or technicians do that, correct?
That's correct. My expertise is to analyze, compare, verify the fingerprints.
So in order to compare prints, you need a latent print, correct?
That's correct.
And you also need a known standard or inked print.
That's correct.
All right. And you talked about points. What are you talking about in terms of points that you're looking for identification? Matching up points to different prints?
When I see the identical points from the latent print that I analyze compared to the non-prints, and I have more than 9 to 10 clear points, that's a match. That are identical fingerprints.
And earlier you said that there are situations where people can touch a surface and not leave a fingerprint, correct?
That's correct.
All right, and that could be, even if they had a hand exposed, they could touch a surface, depending on the surface, and not leave a print.
Depending on the surface, also, some people has skin problems. Doctors that wash their hands all the time, the part of the skin started raising, and they're not able to leave fingerprints on any surface.
Okay. Now, when a crime scene investigator obtains what they perceive to be latent prints, they submit them to you, correct?
That's correct.
Are you able to read and examine every latent print that is submitted to you?
Yes.
Okay. When you receive a latent print, I think we previously said you have to compare it to another sample, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Now, I want to specifically talk about the comparison you did in this Orange County Sheriff's case number 12-048098. Did you receive some prints for comparison in this case?
Yes, I did.
Now, you had known prints from a person named Edgar Collazo, correct?
Yes.
And you also received latent prints from the crime scene investigator, correct?
Yes, I did.
How many latent prints did you receive from the crime scene investigator in this case for comparison?
I received 2 envelopes. Each envelope contains 4 latent prints, 4 latent cards.
Did you examine the latent prints that you received, the 8? There will be a total of 8, correct?
That's correct.
Did you examine the 8 latent prints that you received?
Yes, I did.
Were you able to obtain results on all 8 of those prints?
I analyzed the 8 latent prints, latent cards. I found out that 2 latent prints are of value. They are prints that I can read, that I can see good characteristics, and are able to compare to any non-prints.
Now, if you said 2 were of value, does that mean that 6 were of no value?
That's correct.
What does it mean when a print is of no value?
No value is because there is nothing on the card. If there is any mark it's a smear, or it's too dark, or it's too light. Nothing to compare. There is nothing that I can see a value comparable with other print.
Okay. Now, can you talk about how long a latent print might remain on a surface?
Without being disturbed, a latent print can last for years, many years.
What types of disturbances can change or alter a latent print?
Raining, touching.
Okay. Now, you said 2 of the prints that you identified or you analyzed in this case were of value, correct?
That's correct.
And did you compare those prints to the known prints you had from Edgar Collazo?
Yes, I did.
And what were the results of that comparison?
The result is that the latent prints doesn't match Mr. Collazo fingerprints.
Now, did you obtain any standard prints for Chesney Goebel?
No, I did not.
Did you obtain any standard prints identified as belonging to Lauren Wog?
No, I did not.
Did you obtain any other standard prints from any other person in this case to compare to those 2 latent prints?
No, I did not.
Okay. So you found 2 of value, and those 2 didn't belong to Mr. Collazo.
That's correct.
No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Adams, do you have comments?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Collazo, did you say you only received 8 latent prints for evaluation?
8 latent prints.
Would it surprise
8
you?
latent cards. Some of the cards contain multiple leaves, but they are not value. But we count by card, 8 latent cards.
Okay, so is it possible that there was actually 10 latents contained within the 8 separate cards?
Yes, the thing is the CSI, they can use a long white paper, and they can leave or can use the tape twice, one here and one on the other edge of the card, and they count that one for 2. Our unit count by 1. We are working with the CSI unit to be agree on the same or to be on the same page of music to count the correct amount or leaf.
Okay, so if the CSI were to say that there was 10, that's possible. You just interpret that differently.
That's correct.
So out of whatever was submitted to you, 2 of them were for value. You compared them to Edgar Collazo, and it was not a match.
That's correct.
And no other potential suspects were submitted to you for comparison.
That's correct.
And neither of the residents of that house, Lauren Wag or Chesney Goebel, were submitted to you to eliminate them at all.
I did not receive samples or 10 print cards to compare for elimination purpose. I did not.
When you're doing these comparisons, are you aware of where these latents are taken from?
Yes, all the information is on the bottom of the card. The CSI make notations of everything that they recollect from the crime scenes, and every single detail is on the back of the card.
You did not create a report for these findings, correct?
I did not. At that time, we do not generate reports when we don't have any match or any hits. We start our new procedures reporting every single case, even if the latent prints are not good. We are generating reports for every single case.
Is that a new procedure?
That's new procedure.
When you compared these, that was not the procedures?
No, that was in 2012, I believe. And we started in 2015.
Was it 2012 or 2014 that you did this comparison?
He was in 2014, I'm sorry. Yes, 2014.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Any
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Collazo, thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Williams, let me call its next witness.
Then the state recalls Sergeant Richard Mankiewicz.
Yes, sir. Sergeant, good afternoon. You are back with us. You were previously placed under oath, and you do remain. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
So Sergeant Mankiewicz, when we last spoke before lunch, actually no, it was after lunch, I apologize, you indicated that as of September of 2012, the investigation into the sexual battery at Three Trees Court had not yielded any suspects and was deemed inactive. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. At some point, did you obtain an investigative lead in July of 2014?
I did.
And did that lead provide you with the name of a suspect in the case?
It did.
And what was the name of the suspect that that lead provided?
Edgar Collazo.
Now, following the lead in the case, did you attempt to meet with the victims in the case?
I did.
For what purpose did you attempt to meet with them?
I wanted to show them a photographic lineup containing the suspect in the photo ID.
Now, I'm assuming prior to meeting with them, you had the photographic lineup generated. Is that correct?
I did.
And when a photographic lineup is generated, are the individuals within the lineup identified to look similar?
Yeah, the purpose of it is to have them not match exactly, but obviously look similar to who the suspect is in the case.
And I think defense counsel asked you last time when you testified that you didn't include any black males in the photographic lineup, correct?
Correct, because I knew.
Why is that?
Because I knew the suspect in the case was a Hispanic male.
Okay. And that would be obvious?
Correct.
Okay. Did you, in fact, meet with Chesney Goebel to show her the photographic lineup generated containing Edgar Collazo?
I did.
And was she able to identify anyone in the photographic lineup that contained Mr. Collazo?
She was not.
Did you ask her if she had ever given anyone permission in that lineup to enter her home?
I did.
And what was her response?
She did not.
Did she recognize anybody as having ever seen anyone in that lineup before?
No, she did not.
And can you tell me the date that you conducted this photographic lineup with Ms. Goebel?
Can I take a look at my investigative report?
Counsel, do you object?
No objection.
Go ahead.
August 4th, 2014.
Right. Did you also meet with the other victim in the case, Lauren Wog, to show her a lineup?
I did.
Did you show her the same photographic lineup, maybe not the same piece of paper, but the same series of photographs that you had showed Chesney Goebel?
Yes, I did.
When you met with her, was she able to identify anyone within the photographic lineup?
No, she was not.
Did she indicate that she recognized anybody in that lineup in any way?
No, she didn't.
And do you recall when you performed the photographic lineup with Ms. Wog?
May I look at my report again?
I have no objection, so long as counsel.
No objection.
Go ahead.
August 10th, 2014.
Now, after you had showed the victims their photographic lineups, did you stop investigating this lead?
No, I did not.
What action did you take next in order to see if there was any other evidence as to Mr. Collazo's identity?
I authored a DNA warrant for DNA for Mr. Collazo.
All right, and did you, in August of 2014, ask then CSI Nicole Robinson to obtain that sample?
I did.
No further questions for the sergeant at this time.
Mr. Adams, any comments?
I don't have any cross, Judge.
Sergeant, thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Williams, stand and call us next witness.
Your Honor, the state will call Nicole Robinson to the stand.
Yes, ma'am.
May I proceed?
Yes, ma'am, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Ms. Robinson. Can you please state your name for the reporter?
Nicole Robinson.
And Ms. Robinson, were you employed with the Orange County Sheriff's Office back in August 19th of 2014?
Yes, I was.
In what capacity were you employed with Orange County Sheriff's Office?
I was a crime scene investigator.
And what is a crime scene investigator?
As a crime scene investigator, I process crime scenes, I photographs, I collected DNA.
Did you have any training and experience to hold that position?
Yes.
What, if you could briefly explain your training and experience for the jury?
Okay. As a crime scene investigator for the Orange County Sheriff's Office, they have a training program. It's a 16-week training program, which in August I was still in the training process, but I have approximately 6 years of experience from prior jobs and where I was a crime scene investigator.
What other agencies have you worked as a crime scene investigator?
I worked at the City of Sanford Police Department and the City of Orlando Police Department.
Bringing your attention back to August 19th of 2014, did you come in contact with the Edgar Collazo?
Yes.
How is it that you came in contact with Mr. Collazo?
I received a call to go up to the Criminal Investigations Division in reference to collecting DNA.
And what method was used to collect the DNA?
The way the DNA is collected, I have a sterile cotton tip swabs, and they're used to swab. They're inserted in the mouth, and the interior of the cheek is swabbed.
Is that also known as a buccal swab?
Yes.
And once you said that you use a Q-tip. Was a new Q-tip used in this process?
Yes, it is a package, and inside the package there are two sterile. It's like a little package about this big, and there are two sterile swabs inside.
So you indicated that you took those swabs and you swabbed the inside of Mr. Collazo's cheek. Once you were done doing that, what did you do with the swabs?
The swabs were inserted into a swab box.
And where's Mr. Collazo when you are inserting those into the swab box?
He's at the Orange County Sheriff's Office in an interview room.
No, was he inside of the room with you when you were placing those swabs inside of the box?
Yes, I did. Everything was done in his presence.
Your Honor, permission to approach, Madam Clerk.
Yes, ma'am.
For the record, Your Honor, the state is showing opposing counsel what's been marked as state's identification bill. Now, permission to approach.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, Ms. Robinson, I'm going to show you what's been marked as state's for identification purposes bill. Can you please open that outside of the presence of the jury and let me know if you recognize that item? And was this the same day as the buccal swabs were collected?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Robinson, if we could take a look at what's been marked as state's identification K, do you recognize that photo?
Yes.
And how do you recognize it?
This is the person that I collected the swabs from.
And was this on the same date as the swabs, as the buccal swabs were taken?
Yes.
Does it appear to be in the same or similar manner in which it was when you took the photo?
Yes.
Does it appear to have been altered in any manner?
No.
And is this the image that you remember Mr. Collazo as on August 19, 2014?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would seek to introduce identification K as State's Exhibit 12.
Judge, we are going to object. Can we approach?
Yes, sir. Ms. Everett, if you could mark that as the state's next number exhibit, it will be received into evidence, please.
Enter as state's number 12.
Thank you, and then you may publish. Thank you, Judge.
And Ms. Robinson, is this a photo of the individual that you collected the swabs from on August 19, 2014?
Yes.
And do you see that person in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Does it appear to you that he is of different weight today?
Objection, relevance.
Yes.
Overruled, you can answer.
Yes.
No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Adams, do you have any cross?
Good afternoon. The process that you use to swab for DNA, those are those little cotton swabs on the end of a wooden stick?
Yes.
Okay, and you're able to transfer DNA just by the process of wiping it against the cheek.
Well, let me back up. I am gloved en masse. When I open the swabs, I insert them in a circular motion with the swabs being in the mouth. I do the interior of the cheek, which collects skin cells.
Just one side or both sides of the cheek?
I do it simultaneously on one side of the cheek.
After you were done taking the swab, did you immediately put it in the container that it's currently in?
Yes.
And from there, you would have packaged up that container and it would have been sent to an analyst for processing?
It would have been, once I packaged it, I put an evidence tag number and it was submitted to the evidence section.
Okay. And is that your standard procedure for when you do take a DNA sample?
Yes.
Okay. Is your duties, do you specifically deal with only swabs from buccal swabs, or do you regularly attempt to lift other types of DNA also?
In this particular case, I did nothing but collect the buccal swabs.
In your general duties, do you regularly attempt to take other types of evidence also, or other types of DNA?
If other DNA is present, yes. Sometimes I swab items or...
Okay. Would that be your same procedure in order to attempt to collect DNA off of other types of material as well?
Using a sterile swab, yes.
And then after you're done, putting it in the container, packaging it up, labeling it, and sending it for testing?
Yes.
Okay. And the test that you just described in the photo that you just identified, that was taken when?
On August 19th.
Of 2014.
That is correct.
Nothing further.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens, any
Ms. Robinson, were you instructed to collect any other type of evidence besides the buccal swab from the defendant?
No.
And the person that you obtained that buccal swab on August 19th of 2014, you indicated that you see him in the courtroom?
Yes.
Can you please point him out and describe an article of clothing he's wearing?
He is sitting with his attorney.
Can you describe an article of clothing he's wearing?
He's wearing a red long sleeve shirt and a black vest.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant.
Yes, sir.
No further questions.
Ms. Robinson, thank you very much for your time and your testimony. You are excused.
Thank you.
State may call its next witness, Mr. Williams.
The state calls Jillian White.
Jillian White?
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this case is the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do.
Mr. Williams, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ma'am, could you please tell us your full name and spell your last name for the record?
Yes, my name is Jillian White, W-H-I-T-E.
And Ms. White, where are you currently employed?
I am currently employed with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement in the Orlando Regional Operations Center.
And what is your job title or description as an employee of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
I am a crime laboratory analyst in the biology DNA section.
What do you do as a crime analyst in the biology section at, I'm going to use the acronym FDLE?
I analyze pieces of evidence for the presence of body fluids such as blood, semen, and saliva. Once found, I then attempt to identify the donor of those stains or potentially exclude somebody from donating them.
Now, did you have, or could you tell us a little bit about your educational background and then the training you received to do the job you currently are asked to do on a daily basis?
Yes, I have a Bachelor's of Science in the field of micro and molecular biology from the University of Central Florida. I also took a formal one-year training program that was provided to me by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement in the field of serology and DNA analysis.
Now, I think I might have missed, did you say what year you started to work for FDLE?
Yes, I began in July of 2002, so in a couple weeks it will be 13 years.
Now, when you first went to work at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, did they have a specific training program that is part of their or your employment with them?
Yes, I actually did too. I started as a forensic technologist in the DNA section. There, I learned to assist the analyst in screening items of evidence. I also assisted in the validation of our some technology that we currently have employed. From there, in 2005, I was promoted to an analyst. I then underwent that formal one-year training program to be an analyst, which involved analyzing numerous samples to determine body fluids, blood, semen, saliva. And then once isolated, I then take them on through the DNA process. I learned all about the DNA, the different extraction methods. I have to read several articles, numerous articles, take numerous tests, extensive modules. I have to go through 2 oral boards, one in serology and one in DNA analysis, to then even be qualified to move on to then work to do casework.
Before we go any further and I forget, can you tell us what serology is?
Serology is just the identification of body fluids, such as blood, semen, and saliva.
Okay. How long have you been doing casework on your own?
Since December of 2006, I completed and was certified by FDLE.
And you use the word casework. What is casework without supervision? What is it that you're referring to when you use that phrase?
That specifically means that I am a qualified analyst. I receive items of evidence that I can work then on my own. I then screen it and take it all the way through the DNA process to where then I issue reports of my own conclusions.
Now, Ms. White, have you previously been qualified as an expert in the field of serology and DNA analysis in the courts of Florida?
Yes.
Approximately how many times?
43.
At this time, the state would tender Ms. White as to her qualifications as an expert in serology and DNA analysis.
We'll stipulate.
She, Ms. White would be eligible to answer questions and be here in the
Thank you, Your Honor. So let's start out simple. What is DNA?
DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It's the genetic blueprints that's found in the cells of your body. Your DNA is determined upon conception when you inherit half from your mother and half from your father. Your DNA is the same throughout your entire body, so the DNA that's found in your hair is the same that's found in your blood, semen, saliva, skin.
Why is DNA forensically useful?
Well, the way that we can use it as a forensic tool is the majority of our DNA is the same, which tells us we have 2 eyes, 2 arms, 2 ears, 2 legs. But there's just a small portion of our DNA that's different, and that's what makes us unique. And as a forensic scientist, that's what I'm interested in. And I'm only interested in 15 areas of that DNA. And all I'm looking to see is simply how often that DNA repeats itself. For example, I'm looking to see how many times the word cat is repeated. C-A-T, C-A-T, C-A-T. That gives me a set of repeats. And if you remember, I said we get half from our mom and half from our dad. I'm looking at a set of repeats at each of the 15 areas. So at one area, I may have a set of repeats of a 7 and a 9, and at that same area, you may have a set of repeats of a 10 and 11. And that's what makes us different and makes us unique. And so what I do through my DNA testing is I'm looking at all 15 areas to get the set of repeats, and that gives me somebody's unique DNA profile. And in addition to those 15 areas, I have one area that lets me know if the sample comes from a male or a female.
Now, currently, what type of, are there different types of ways or different ways to test DNA? Or different processes, maybe is a better way to look at it.
Well, the type of testing that I do at FDLE is a type of testing called STR, or short tandem repeats. And that's specifically looking to see how often the DNA is repeated.
Okay. Can you walk us through the process of the actual testing that you do, the physical process, when you receive an item of evidence for your analysis?
Well, once we have some evidence that comes into the lab, I need to know what type of body fluid I'm looking for. If I'm looking for blood, if I'm looking for semen or saliva. That helps for me to determine which path I need to then go to then extract the DNA.
Okay, once you know, well, back up, how do you identify or know which different type of body fluid or DNA you're looking for?
Well, through our serology or screening process, I have simple chemical tests that are that I can use to help determine the presence of different body fluids. For blood, I have a simple color change test where I'm looking just to see if the blood is present. And one of the nice things is that blood is red-brown in color, so I can actually see the presence of it too. Do a simple chemical test, I now have a stain to take on through the DNA process. When I'm looking for the presence of semen, I have another simple chemical test which I can apply that, if present, will create a color change. Once I see that color change, I can take a portion of that stain and then look at it visually underneath the microscope for the presence of sperm cells. From there, I then can take that through the DNA process.
So once you've identified the type of DNA you're looking for, and you're using the term DNA process, take us through what the DNA process is, what you actually do, and how you do it.
Well, once I've identified a stain of interest, I simply take a portion of either, if it's a swab or a cutting of some fabric, clothing, I take a portion of that, place it in a tube, and then I simply add some chemicals and heat to break open the cells to release the DNA into solution. From there, I go through a process to determine how much DNA is actually in that sample, so then I can go through and actually almost Xerox it or photocopy it millions of times to make more of it. But I'm only Xeroxing those 15 areas. I then take a sample, put it on some of my instruments that help me separate that DNA based on size into those 15 areas. Then from there, I can look at visually each 15 areas to get the set of repeats for that sample.
Okay. Now, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement receives submissions from law enforcement agencies. Is that correct?
Yes.
In other words, the Orlando Police Department or the Orange County Sheriff's Office doesn't do DNA testing, they send it to you.
That is correct.
Okay. How does your agency receive the items, and then what do they do with it once they receive it? In other words, the process before it comes to you.
Once the agency, they will submit it in. We have an evidence intake section. Basically, when it comes in, it's given a unique FDLE identification number, and we basically will then track it and mirror it with the agency's agency case number and exhibit number. From there, that evidence is received into our system. It's then tracked electronically throughout the entire process. It goes through the laboratory, which maintains the chain of custody. That piece of evidence will first go into our evidence intake vault, which has extremely limited access. I cannot even get into there. Once the case is then assigned to me, I then will request the evidence. The evidence will then be transferred to my possession, where then I store it under my lock and key until I'm ready to process that specific case by itself.
Now, have you ever heard of a company named Cellmark Forensics?
Yes, that is the outsourcing laboratory that we use.
And what do you mean by outsourcing laboratory? How does Cellmark fit into what the Florida Department of Law Enforcement does?
We have a backlog of cases, as a lot of laboratories do, and so we ask the aid of other laboratories to help us with our backlog. So there are some randomly selected cases that then are sent out to that laboratory who has they operate with same standard operating procedures as we do. Therefore, we know that the same quality assurance programs are being maintained like we would in our laboratory. So then we can submit the evidence to them to work it, and then they will then send us back reports.
And have you worked submissions or items of evidence that were submitted to you that had been previously submitted to Cellmark Forensics and returned, or comparisons to those items?
Yes, typically everything that has been worked at Cellmark, we will not rework, but if they have their results, I then can take results that I have and use it for comparison purposes because of the standard operating procedures and the quality assurance programs that are followed.
Your Honor, at this time the state seeks to admit State's Exhibit M as the next numbered exhibit through stipulation of the parties. And when I ask the court to read the stipulation to the jury.
No objection. It's a stipulation, Judge.
Enter this state's number 13.
Okay. Stipulation just submitted. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor, correct.
Okay, members of the jury, this is a stipulation to the admission of DNA evidence. It reads as follows. The stipulation meaning the parties have agreed to what I'm about to read to you. Number one, the gray T-shirt marked as State's Exhibit B for identification and identified by Lauren Wog as the shirt she wore on the night of June 1st, 2012, was sent to Cellmark Forensics for DNA analysis. Number two, DNA analyst Molly McGahee, employed by Cellmark Forensics in Dallas, Texas, took cuttings from the T-shirt and examined those cuttings for a potential DNA profile. Number three, the analysis by Cellmark Forensics followed procedures outlined by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement and yielded a DNA profile from the epithelial fraction of the cuttings from the shirt, as well as a profile from the sperm cell fraction of the cuttings from the shirt. Number four, the cuttings from State's Exhibit B and the DNA profiles obtained from it were sent back to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement for comparison to other DNA evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Ms. White, I'd like to talk to you specifically about work you did on FTLE case number 2012-05-05320. You recall that case?
I do.
And I see you looking down. Did you prepare a report in that case?
I did.
And as part of your report preparation, do you prepare notes as you go through your analysis process?
Yes, I document everything.
And would it assist you to refer to your notes as we go through the questioning we're about to do?
Yes, it would.
Counsel, would you have any objections to her referring to the report?
I do not have objection.
Just do us a favor, Ms. White. When you refer to the report, please let us know that, okay?
If you could make sure we let us know which report, if it's her report or the other.
And Yes, Your Honor. I'm specifically, at this point, Ms. White, referring to the report dated September 22nd, 2014.
Yes.
Okay. Now, did you receive an item of evidence for DNA analysis in regards to that FDLE case number, and specifically FDLE item number 3?
I did.
And what was that item represented as being?
It was represented as being buccal swabs from Edgar Collazo.
What are buccal swabs?
Buccal swabs are simply like a Q-tip that is then rubbed on the inside of an individual's mouth, coming from the buccal area. We then use this sample as what we call a known standard, known reference standard, meaning I know that this person's DNA should be the source of the profile. I then use that as a comparison purpose tool to compare to any unknown profiles that have already been developed in the case.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness to what's in evidence as states Exhibit 11?
Yes, sir.
Ms. White, I'm going to hand you States Exhibit 11. Could you look at the outside of it and tell me if you recognize any of the markings on the outside?
I do.
And which markings do you recognize?
First is the yellow FDLE barcode label that is received as soon as it is submitted into FDLE. Also, my handwritten FDLE label, exhibit number, the date I examined it, the initials, and then the initials on the seals were then I sealed it once my analysis was complete.
Now, Ms. White, when this item came to you, was it sealed at both ends?
Yes.
Did it appear to have been tampered with in any way?
No.
All right, so you receive it, you open it, correct?
That is correct.
And when you opened it, what did you find?
May I refer to my notes?
Yes, ma'am.
Within it were 2 used cotton tip swabs that had no apparent staining, where I just took a portion of one through the DNA process.
Okay, and that same process that you previously defined for us or described for us, is that correct?
Yes, where I simply take a cutting, put it all the way through to get somebody's unique DNA profile, which I obtained a full, complete profile at all 15 areas.
Okay. Did you do any comparison with the profile that you obtained from the buccal swabs in States Exhibit 11?
I did.
Well, you said a full, complete profile. Was that profile male or female?
From the buccal swabs was male.
Okay. And which items or which data did you compare the DNA profile from States 11 to?
The Cellmark report had 3 unknown profiles that I was able to do comparison purposes to.
So now, just to be clear, you're referring to a report from Cellmark for evidence that was sent to them and they sent back to you, correct?
Yes. The one they worked it in their house. I actually never saw the evidence.
Now, when they sent their report back to you, what did it contain? You mentioned it a moment ago, but I'd like you to explain a little further.
Well, what the information obtains is what they send to us is their report, which again has gone through the same standard operating procedures, quality assurance checks that it would have gone through in my laboratory. That report gets issued to FDLE along to the submitting agency. So we both get a copy of the report. I also get a copy of their summary tables, which is the list of repeats at all of the areas that they tested, so I can actually see the profiles that they generated. And also comes with it is the data copy of the electropherograms, or those are actually the peaks, the data that I look at, so I can then do comparison purposes for my aspect.
Now, do you have the Cellmark report in front of you, and that would be their Orchid Cellmark number FL12-0090?
Yes, I do.
And that's dated September 18th, 2012?
Yes.
Councilman, you have that? Okay. Now, Ms. White, what items of evidence were submitted to Cellmark for analysis?
It looks like what I have documented, they received vaginal swabs, cervical swabs, labial swabs, underwear, a gray t-shirt, and buccal swabs from Lauren Wag.
And the report indicates that those items were, some of those items were tested for DNA. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Which of those items were tested for DNA?
Five of the items were first taken through the serology process because they needed to determine what type of DNA is present. The reason being is if sperm cells are identified, we have to take them through a process where we call it a differential separation, where we are trying to separate the sperm cells from all of the epithelial cells. And this specifically helps us in sexual assault cases where we know the female can overwhelm the male because it's coming from the female's body, but we have the process where we can separate out the sperm cells from the E cells from one sample. So that's very important for us to first identify the presence of sperm, which was done on 3 items: the cervical swabs, labial swabs, and the gray t-shirt all gave positive identification for the presence of sperm. From there, they took the following through the DNA process. They took the cervical swabs, labial swabs, a cutting from the gray t-shirt, and then the buccal swabs for the standard through the DNA process.
What were the results, and we're going to go item by item, what were the results of the DNA testing as to the cervical swab that was submitted to them, to Cellmark?
Now, as I read them, I will be referring to them as the epithelial fraction and the sperm fraction. Please remember that it comes from one sample that we just happen to separate mid-process. So, the epithelial fraction of the cervical swabs, they obtained a complete profile that matched that of Lauren Wag, which I would expect because it came from her cervix. The sperm cell fraction of the cervical swab was a mixture, meaning they indicated they saw the presence of more than just one individual. The major profile was consistent with that of Lauren Wag, and the minor alleles originated from an unknown individual.
As to the cervical swabs, the minor profile, as they define it, were they able to identify whether that was a male or female profile?
They were not able to make any association to male or female.
Okay. Is that all for the cervical swabs?
For them, yes.
Okay. Moving on to the labial swabs.
For the epithelial fraction, they obtained a profile which matched that of Lauren Wag, which I would expect from her epithelial cells. For the sperm fraction, they were able to obtain a partial predominant DNA profile which was consistent with Laura Wag. No conclusions could be reached regarding the presence of any additional types to that sample.
Given your expertise in DNA, what does that phrase mean to you, that no conclusions could be reached though something was there?
Basically, there is DNA information, it just does not reach a specific threshold for us to be able to do any comparison purposes to.
Now, is that the same case for the profile obtained from the cervical swabs?
No, it is not.
Can you explain the cervical swabs and the unknown profile for that?
Yes. For the labial swabs, it's just limited in nature where you can't draw any conclusions. For the cervical swabs, there is enough information there that comparison purposes can be made to it.
Okay? Anything else as to the labial swabs?
No.
And finally, what were the results of the DNA testing that Cellmark did as to the cuttings from the gray T-shirt?
So they took a cutting from the semen positive stain on the gray T-shirt. For the epithelial fraction of that stain, the predominant DNA profile originated from an unknown male, and no conclusions could be reached regarding the presence of additional types to that sample. For the sperm fraction, a partial DNA profile was obtained from that cutting, which was consistent from the predominant profile from that epithelial fraction. Because if you remember, it's one stain that we split, so that same profile was seen as consistent in both fractions.
Okay. And you had these results for comparison purposes when you performed your DNA analysis on State's Exhibit 11, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us about the comparison that you did between the DNA profile in State's Exhibit 11 and the results obtained from the cervical swabs from Cellmark's laboratory?
The buccal swabs that I had for comparison purposes from Edgar Collazo, I could neither include him or exclude him as a contributor to the mixture from the sperm fraction of the cervical swabs.
Now, what does it mean that you can neither include or exclude?
Based on the information that they obtained from that unknown individual, there was not enough information for me to be able to conclusively include him, and there's not enough information there for me to conclusively exclude him. So therefore, I cannot make a determination either direction.
When you say there's not enough information, are you saying that there wasn't enough DNA present?
No, we have certain thresholds that have to be met. For me to be able to say somebody is included, I have to then come back and be able to provide you a statistical reference to how the weight of that inclusion. Same thing with a match. Once I say somebody matches, I'm not calling identity. I just say that two profiles match, and then I have to provide statistical weight of how rare or common that profile is again in the population.
So, as to the cervical swabs in your comparison, Cellmark reported the presence of DNA, correct?
They reported the presence of an additional contributor to that profile.
But your thresholds prohibit you from saying whether or not the profile from Edgar Collazo can be included or excluded as to that profile.
Yes.
Okay. Does that mean that sperm was identified, or do you know if sperm was identified on the cervical swabs?
Looking at the Cellmark report, it was positive for the microscopic verification of sperm. So yes, they saw sperm in the sample.
Okay. Moving on to the two samples that you compared from the gray T-shirt, starting first with Q2, and I'm using the Cellmark number, 5.01.16EF. Do you have that in front of you?
Yes, that is the epithelial fraction of the cutting from the shirt.
Can you tell us about your comparison to the profile that Cellmark obtained from the epithelial fraction of the gray T-shirt?
They obtained a predominant DNA profile, a male profile. I then compared it, and the predominant DNA profile previously obtained from the epithelial fraction matches the DNA profile from Edgar Collazo.
Okay. Now, you earlier told us about the process of differential separation, correct?
Yes.
So the comparison you just did, those are not sperm cells, or are they? Are those sperm cells in the epithelial fraction, or are they something else?
Well, part of the process is what we try to do is separate as best as we can and try to remove as much epithelial away from the sperm. Sometimes some sperm may get transferred into the epithelial cells, but you have to remember the epithelial fraction is anything that's not sperm. So it can also be the male's white blood cells, epithelial cells. That can be other things that are part of that stain.
It could be any DNA material that's not sperm.
Or potentially there could be some sperm that have been trapped over into that fraction.
Okay. And now moving on to the final comparison, the sperm fraction of the gray T-shirt. Did you compare the profile from Edgar Collazo to the sperm fraction profile obtained by Cellmark?
Yes, the partial DNA profile that they previously obtained from the sperm fraction matched that also of Edgar Collazo.
Okay, now you just a moment ago told us that when you call a match, you have to attach the statistical significance to it. What are you referring to when you say that?
Since we do not call identity, I do not say that this is this person's profile. What we do is once we do the comparison, I then will say whether or not or how rare or common I would expect to see this same profile again in the population. Now I want to tell you how unique these profiles are. If you remember, I said that we look at 15 areas, 2 repeats at each area. So that's a total of 30 repeats. If at even one of those repeats does not match, they are automatically excluded. So in order for me to report a match, every single piece of DNA has to be the same.
So in other words, there might be situations where you're missing one of those peaks, correct?
That is correct.
But as long as you have all the peaks and the peaks match, it is a match.
That is correct.
But if even one of them is incorrect, then you will say that person is
Objection,
excluded.
leading.
Rephrase, please.
What is your analysis, or what do you report out if even one of the peaks is different?
That person is excluded.
Okay. So we started out talking about, you stated how significant the statistics were. Please proceed as to how you establish or attach statistical significance to the matches that you found in this case.
For the epithelial fraction, the frequency of occurrence of the predominant DNA profile that was previously obtained from Cellmark from the cutting of the gray T-shirt, I would expect to see for unrelated individuals is approximately 1 in 520 quintillion.
Now, how many zeros are in a quintillion?
A quintillion is a number followed by 18 zeros.
And when you say you would expect to see it, in other words, you would expect to examine 520 quintillion samples before you found this profile again.
Well, actually, think of it like the lottery.
Okay.
The chances of winning the lottery are rare, but it doesn't necessarily mean that 2 people can't win it, because we know 2 people can win it. But the chances of somebody winning it are extremely rare. And so these numbers are the chances of how rare that profile is. And just to help it give you visually the size of this number, our current world population is approximately 7 billion. And a billion is a number followed by 9 zeros. So 520 quintillion is approximately 74 billion world populations.
Okay. Did you attach statistical significance to the match of Edgar Collazo's profile to the profile obtained from the sperm fraction of the gray T-shirt?
I did. And it was, again, a partial profile, meaning that there are areas where not all of the repeats are accounted. There's only one of the 2, but all the information matched. And so for 15 areas, the frequency of occurrence of the partial profile from the sperm cell fraction for unrelated individuals is approximately 1 in 4.1 trillion. And so comparing that also to world populations, a trillion is a number followed by 12 zeros. So it's approximately 580 world populations in size.
Now, Ms. White, are you aware of a situation where one person can have the same DNA profile as another?
Yes, that would be identical twins.
What about non-identical twins? Are non-identical twins going to have the same DNA profile as another sibling?
No.
Can you explain why that is?
Well, again, our DNA is unique, and we inherit it, and it's the way that the DNA chromosomes sort is what gives the random effect. Yes, they will share a lot of their same repeats, but they will not have identical profiles, and that's what we can distinguish between individuals, with the exception of identical twins.
I previously asked you about whether or not sperm was identified on the cervical swabs, and you indicated that it was, based upon Cellmark's findings, correct?
Yes.
Was sperm also found on the gray T-shirt?
Yes, it was.
And was sperm also found on the labial swabs?
Yes, it was.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Adams, you may cross whenever.
Good afternoon, Ms. White.
Good afternoon.
But to be clear, the sperm that was found on the labial swabs and the cervix, you cannot say that those are a match to Edgar Collazo, correct?
Yes, I do not have any results for that.
Okay. On the Cellmark report, the Cellmark testing that was memorialized on the September 18th, 2012 report, the profile from the cervical swab was a mixture, correct?
From the sperm fraction, yes.
Okay. And no statistical calculations for race were ever done for that mixture or those profiles, correct?
As far as Cellmark never had any standards for comparison. They do have a comment where they do compare unknown profiles across the board. As far as I'm the one that had the standard that I came back later, and I did my comparisons following my standard operating procedures.
So as far as the statistical calculations for the profiles from the cervix and the labia, was there any statistical calculation based on race done for those two?
I did not provide any. There was, as far as the labial swabs, there was not enough information for anybody to do any comparisons. The only thing that Cellmark has not documented in their report is they state that the unknown male predominant DNA profile from the epithelial fractions of the gray T-shirt cannot be excluded as the minor contributor to the sperm fraction of the cervical swabs. That is the only comparison that they have. Since they do not have a standard, there is no statistics to go along because to them it is an unknown profile. When I have it, again, it does not meet my thresholds to be able to, I cannot make a determination.
So it sounds like the short answer is no.
There's not one available.
Okay. How much DNA could two siblings with the same mother and the same father share?
It depends on however many they can have, maybe 7, 8, maybe repeat units that they share in common. They could have some more, but to have up to 15, they would never share that many unless that they were identical.
Okay. And when you say 15, you're talking about loci, correct?
The locus, yes. The areas of repeats.
And that's something that you would kind of analogize as to like an address in DNA?
Yes.
And analysts didn't always use 15 loci, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Over time, how many did they start off with when they first started comparing DNA?
I believe they probably started maybe when they went to STRs, maybe 6, but I would be guessing. I never did that technology.
So they're still finding new areas?
Oh, yes. They know of thousands and thousands of areas, but we only need so many. Even at 13, we have numbers in the quadrillions that already can exclude. So there are thousands and thousands out there. And honestly, with the numbers getting even one more, I would not expect for them to be able to be excluded from that, with these numbers being that high.
The mixture from the cervix, there was a major profile and a minor profile, correct?
There was a major profile, which was Laura Wag, but then there was minor alleles contributed to an unknown individual.
And to be clear, this is there's a sperm fraction in there, correct?
Yes, that was the sperm fraction.
Is it safe to assume that must involve a male?
I don't know. I don't. As far as they don't have anything, I would assume since they identified sperm, that potentially could originate from a male individual. Yes.
The process of taking a swab, do you have training on the process of taking and preserving swabs that are going to later be compared?
Part of my training, I do prepare samples for us to test, so that way I do have experience and stuff. But I do not go out to crime scenes and process crime scenes. I do not go and take swabs from victims. But I do know the proper techniques because it's my job to then educate the agencies of how to collect and preserve evidence.
There's some sort of drying process, isn't there, when you take a swab?
Yes, we recommend that they do dry the swab.
And is there some sort of special machine that would be used to dry it out?
Air.
Okay. How long does that usually take?
It depends on how wet an item is, just like a piece of clothing. Depending on how wet it is how long it takes to dry.
Okay. And what are the risks of why is that done?
Well, once the stain is dried and in a dried condition, it's stable, and it then can sit there. So in case if I don't get to it for 3 or 4 months, it's just in the same condition as it was when it was dried down.
If it's not dried out, there is a risk of it molding or being damaged, correct?
It can be degraded due to moisture and bacteria, yes.
Okay. The T-shirt comparison, you don't know where that was taken from on the T-shirt, correct?
I never saw the evidence.
You don't know whether there was a visible stain on the T-shirt, correct?
Based on their testing, they did a chemical test, which basically helps them visualize the stain, and then they took a portion of that to look at it underneath the microscope. So I would say that they knew exactly where that stained area was.
You'd say that, but you don't know. You don't have any personal knowledge.
Well, I perform the same type of testing. So in order for me to be able to take a cutting of it, I use my screening tools to isolate a stain, draw a circle around it, or identify it, so then I can come back to it and sample that stain.
When you talk about the matches of different comparisons, what are you looking at that draws that conclusion? because you testified that there was some comparisons and that there was matches. What does that look like to you?
It's a table of numbers, and I'm comparing one set of numbers to a second set of numbers. If both sets of numbers are a 1415 and my comparison is a 1415, they match. If one's a 1414 and the other's a 1415, it's an exclusion. It does not match. Simple numbers.
And are those numbers that some sort of computer program gives you?
Yes.
Nothing further.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, any redirect from the state?
Yes, Your Honor. On one point, in regards to the cervical swabs, Ms. White, I think I heard you say that the minor contributor to the cervical swabs was identified or could not be excluded from the major contributor to the grade cutting from the T-shirt, sperm fraction. Is that correct?
Yes, Cellmark has comparisons based on their standard operation. They have an unknown male profile that they then took to compare along to theirs. And so I was simply reading their comparison where they stated that the unknown male, that from the predominant DNA profile from the epithelial fraction of the gray shirt, could not be excluded to the minor contributor of the sperm fraction of the cervical swabs.
And you identified the contributor to the grade cutting of the T-shirt as a profile matching that of Edgar Collazo.
Yes, that is correct.
And Cellmark's data indicated that that profile could not be excluded from the cervical swabs.
The one that they obtained from the unknown male.
No further questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. White, thank you very much for your time, your testimony. You are excused. Mr. Adams, Mr. Williams, counsel, floor, please. Mr. Williams, statement call its next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls Javier Fuentes.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and before we get Mr. Fuentes in here, the evidence you are about to receive concerning other crimes, wrongs, or acts allegedly committed by the defendant will be considered by you for the limited purpose of proving motive, intent, identity, in the absence of mistake or accident, and you shall consider it only as it relates to those issues. However, the defendant is not on trial for a crime, wrong, or act that is not included in the information. Mr. Fuentes may come on up.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, could you please tell us your full name and spell your last name for the record?
Javier Fuentes, Fuentes.
And Mr. Fuentes, in what city do you currently reside?
Orange.
In Orange County, in what city?
Metro West.
Metro West, okay. How long have you lived in the Orlando area?
In Orlando area, about 15 years.
Okay. I'm going to take you back to September of 2010. Where were you living in September of 2010?
I think it was in Semoran Boulevard, Bellagio Apartments.
Okay. And do you remember what your apartment number was back then?
I don't remember.
Okay. Do you remember an incident that occurred on September 25th of 2010 or in the early morning hours of September 25th, 2010?
That was when I was walking my dog.
Okay, so something unusual happened to you that morning?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What were you doing at the time that this unusual thing happened?